Deep sea divers, what are your horror stories? I wear contacts, so getting water in my mask is extra bad as I can't open my eyes underwater. Shortly after being told about a shark colliding with my friend from behind and removing his mask, I am pretty scared about this, not sharks in general. Comma, and I see a shark heading for me. They are curious. They often shoulder bump you as they turn at the last second. But she wasn't changing course. I stayed calm and still as long as I could, and at the last second before she hit my mask I ducked. Except instead of ducking under, I just headbutted her right in the nose. Everyone saw and thinks it was the funniest thing ever. I may be the only person alive who headbutted an 11-foot shark in the nose, but it was because I was scared she would take my goggles off. Free dove to about 160 feet in Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas. It's where a lot of the free diving world records are set. Super neat place. Google a picture. Anyway, I'd never really been past 100 feet free diving. But this was the perfect place to do it. No current. There's ropes to keep you straight and allow a slight pull back up. Scary part is that you become pretty strongly negatively buoyant after like 60 feet. So you're basically hauling ass down while doing nothing and using very little air. So I'm dazed out a bit, feeling good and counting the lines that mark depth, and all of a sudden feel pressure like my trachea is going to collapse, and wake up and realize I've counted to the line that's around 160 feet or so. Very scary moment because I wasn't sure if my body could take the depth or if I had gone too far and wouldn't have enough air to get back up. Which is a much slower and more air intensive process. I got the bends once. I was careful. Followed my charts and my computer. Had appropriate depths and surface time. But I didn't drink enough water, so I was all out of whack. Felt fine until I got home. Mild headache. Then I woke up and it was just pain in my left arm. Elbows. Fingers. Couldn't even bend them without bad pain. My headache was intense and I was so dizzy. Called my older, more experienced dive buddy and I got rushed to the hospital. Docs got me hooked up and fluids. Checked my dive logs while the decompression chamber was set up. And then got me in there with a nurse. 8 hours in a tube about the length of a car but as wide as maybe a double bed. I was on oxygen and hooked up to an IV and it was so loud. With all the air rushing in. As soon as I got to depth the pain vanished. It was crazy. I'm fine now obviously. But I wasn't allowed to dive for a month, which sucked, but hey. Diving the day before a hurricane on a small South Pacific island. Out of nowhere a black and white sea snake, venomous, wrapped itself around my arm. Apparently this happens from time to time before major storms. They can sense it and look for things that are heading towards the shore so that they don't have to put in so much effort to get out of the sea. As soon as I was in the shallows it uncurled and headed up the beach where it hid under a breadfruit tree. I thought I was going to get bitten to death by a snake at sea. Turns out I was just a taxi for a very calm but rather rushed reptile. The only scare I've had is some jackout in a yacht cruising through our dive location at full throttle. You could hear the boat coming for a solid minute or two before it flew over our heads. Our boat had a dive flag on it and we had a buoy with a dive flag on it. They didn't even slow down. Barracuda. Sharks. Rays. Manatees. Dolphins. All cool. Humans are way scarier. Night diving is incredibly creepy. You don't realize how dark the ocean is until you are in it. My biology teacher told us that she once was swimming in the south of the Philippines because she was trying to find an elusive seahorse, and she went quite deep at night when they are more active, and she got attacked by a shark and her team got out fast. I was diving under an oil rig between Long Beach and Catalina Island. I was collecting sea scallops at around 60 feet or so, and knowing that there were seals all around I always kept an eye out for sharks. You just can't help but think about them. So I was just about to finish my dive, but I was looking for one more scallop for dinner and I saw a blur swoosh right by me just in front of my face. My initial immediate reaction was shock. But it was just a damn seal playing with me. I literally was screaming underwater for a couple of seconds. Funny thing is I have over 25 logged open water dives. Some at night. Mostly around Catalina, and I never saw a shark. Not me, but my brother. And not deep sea. Sorry. He was 18. Part of the dive club at his school. They went on a diving trip. The crew that handled the dive counted heads wrong, and halfway through the dive the boat went back to shore without them. So there they were 2 kilometers from shore with their only option to swim back. There were about 5 of them. 2 girls, 3 guys. All of them between 15 and 18 YO. About halfway through, one of the girls couldn't swim anymore and started crying. My brother along with another guy swam with her, dragging her along, making sure she didn't drown. Everyone made it out okay. Worst part. School tried to hide it and had the audacity to suspend my brother from school for catching him with a beer while on the trip. Needless to say, they were in deep tea when it came out. Not sure exactly what happened though. Was doing a boat dive and came up to find 20-foot swells. We just had to chill for a while down under until the boat would calm down and we could actually grab the ladder without getting smashed. I remember seeing the ladder going up and down 6-8 feet at a time. I finally grabbed the rope and climbed up as fast as I could. I hung onto the ladder and the boat crew grabbed my BCD and hauled me out of the water and onto the swim step. Half the divers puked on the way back into port. That was the roughest conditions that I have ever been diving in. It wasn't exactly a deep dive, but it was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. I was on a beach dive with my parents, having swum from the beach out to a small reef and then descending. It was only a few minutes after getting down to the reef that something started going on with my parents. My mother was agitated and clutching her chest. We surfaced and she started spitting up dark liquid and struggling to breathe. Fortunately, it was a busy beach, and after we inflated an emergency buoy, lifeguards rushed out and carried her back to the shore where an ambulance waited. It turned out she'd had swimmer's edema induced by the greater pressure. Things turned out fine, but having a medical emergency underwater in the ocean is especially level of scary. I did a shipwreck night dive on New Year's Eve one year, and it was spooky as hell. 80 feet down. Really small plane. Visibility was obviously not great. I've only done this one night dive, so these slow moving fish would come looming out of the dark. Scarier to me was getting back on the boat, because it got really stormy. You'll be looking up at the ladder, and it had come crashing down right next to you. The waves were crazy. My brother got hit by the ladder, but not too badly. I wear heavy prescription lenses and can't wear contact lenses. Halfway through a week-long liveaboard dive trip, someone dropped a tank on my prescription mask and shattered it. I usually had a second set with me, but could not find them and only brought one. Because hey, nothing had ever happened before. I am functionally blind without corrective lenses. I can see colors and that's about it. Starting about 5 inches from my face. I was devastated, but decided to go diving anyway. With my husband as my seeing eye diver, I could see my gauges, so I felt reasonably safe. It was among the most amazing 3 days of diving I've ever had. I saw the colors, shapes, and movement, without being focused on the details. I actually took many of the best underwater photos I'd ever taken. I wasn't worried about focusing on a particular coral or fish. I was looking at the larger color patterns. So it didn't turn out to be the disaster I'd thought it was. Honestly, the things that really scare me, makes my heart run fast etc. 2. 1. If my air consumption looks funky, suggesting a leak, or the current is suddenly fast. Basically anything that could lead to a life-threatening issue due to running out of air. When you're deep, you can't just fly back up and be fine. 2. Hurting reefs. Like honestly, if my hand brushes against one, even dead, or gets super close so the dust unsettles because of the current or something, I feel so guilty. Only thing that really scares me is lung expansion injuries. So the one time I was freaked out was swimming near a wreck at about 100 feet. I lost perspective and buoyancy control, and suddenly realized I had surfaced about 40 feet in 30s or less. Visions of the bends and a popped lung instantly came to mind and dropped a ton of air from my BC to get back to depth in a hurry. Got a massive squeeze from it in my ears. But it gave me a chance to calm the FCK down and get a better sense of where I was and re-establish buoyancy control. Bottom line, the scariest things that can happen while driving is the shit you can do to yourself. TL. Dr. I fell off ILAP while diving. The weather had been pretty hot and the water temp was also around 26°C. We'd done a dive and a long swim in the morning. We then headed out for our second dive and the boat dropped us in the wrong spot. So we had to swim against a massive current to get to our intended site. Halfway into the swim I just felt like I needed a nap. And so, I closed my eyes and did exactly that. It felt so peaceful. I immediately dropped down to an even deeper depth and was lucky that one of the guys on the dive turned around at that moment and saw what was happening. He swam as fast as he could towards me and caught me. He asked if I was okay. I said I was and passed out again. This time spitting my reg out and started blowing bubbles. He then went behind me, shoved my reg back in, wrapped his arms around me and took me straight to the surface. He saved my life. I was on a night dive looking for a resident 6-gill shark when a large grey animal darted past me, just barely illuminated by my light. It was way faster than I was told the shark would be and I couldn't quite make out the size. Then it happened again on the other side. Both times it was in my peripheral vision, barely illuminated by my forward aimed spotlight, and very fast. For some reason when I got to the bottom, I decided just to sit on my knees and aim the light in one direction until something happened. As it turned out, the beast was a harbor seal using the light to find fish to eat. She hung out with us for a while, which was a pretty cool experience. We never found the shark, but I did think I was being hunted for a bit. I was diving in the early 90s off the coast of Florida. I had been using a spearfish ineffectually for a few minutes when I heard a strange grinding noise to my right. I turned my head to see an enormous set of barracuda jaws grinding just inches from my face. I still recall the fish's eye rotating around to check me out as if considering it should take a bite or not. My family got certified while I was in high school. Our last dive was open water. We decided we would do it on vacation. All other dives were in the States in a pool. Wreck dive about 200 yards offshore. Not sure why, but Mom's tank went empty way faster than everyone else's while we were out at sea. She didn't realize it until it was less than 5%. We surfaced and started swimming back. But she panicked. She was an experienced swimmer and snorkeler, but she couldn't handle it with the other scuba gear. We whistled for help. The locals thought we were just being tools. Didn't realize she was struggling. We kept her up and got her back. Finally, about 50 yards out, they realized we were towing in a diver in distress. Everything turned out okay. I haven't been scuba diving since. My brother went on to become a dive master. Sorry, not really a deep sea dive. I dove the Great Blue Hole of Belize when I was 16. I was 150 feet underwater. And about a total of a dozen bull reef sharks were swimming above and below me in circles. Regardless of all of the sharks. 11/10 coolest experience I've ever had. My craziest experience was diving with my father and cousin. We were searching for lobster in the cracks and crevices of huge rocks. My cousin signaled to come over and pointed in a dark hole. I shine my light in and here is a huge lobster stuck in what looked like the back. I sunk my arm shoulder deep into the hole and triumphantly pull out the biggest damn lobster I have ever seen to this day. As we're celebrating with silent underwater gestures of enthusiasm. Not one but two moray coming popping out of the very hole. I'll also never forget diving with my father and running into black sea bass larger than a small car. It wasn't scary, but I was aware this fish looked big enough to try to eat me. My dad has shit his wetsuit while diving. Got up to the surface and had to peel it off. This will probably get buried, but I once had a mask squeeze hole lobster diving at night where I burst a blood vessel in my eye and my mask filled up with blood. It was pitch black and all I could see was red in my eyes through the glow of my light. Eventually I was able to flush my mask enough to clear the blood and get back to bagging lobster. I hit bag limit 2. Night dive on the Great Barrier Reef with my partner who was learning to dive. Myself, about 10 years of diving, and a diver master. First night dive for my partner, who had been hearing from the two of us about how incredible it is. Night diving is one of those amazing, life-changing experiences completely different to daytime diving as the sights and sounds of the reef are radically different. Plus viewing the reef through just the small areas of light from your torches changes how you process the experience. It's exhilarating and incredibly zen at the same time. As we're circling back to the boat, the sharks, who have been standoffish but curious, as they usually are, come in and one has an inquisitive bite of the diver master's fins. Never seen or heard of sharks getting this aggressive with divers. So the three of us damn near catapulted ourselves out of the water and cut the dive short. Have never been worried about sharks while diving until that moment. Normally, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. But not this time. My dad was a Navy diver for a while. He was on the team that searched the Challenger wreckage. I've heard crazy stories about getting nitrogen narcosis, effectively drunk underwater, and he offered his regulator to a fish. Scariest story he told me about though was he was working underneath an aircraft carrier, very large, and someone screwed up and didn't take tide times into effect. So he and his dive partner started seeing that the bottom of the carrier and the bottom of the bay were getting closer and they had to GTFO pronto. Surprise. They made it. Not mine but my uncle's. My uncle got lost from a group and was beginning to start surfacing when 5 or 6 guys grab him and drag him to a small boat. Turns out he strayed into a very small military installation nearby and didn't realize it. He got grabbed up by some Navy divers. This is probably a little late to the party, but this was pretty horrible for me. About 9 months ago, I was swimming through a little coral canyon off of Okinawa with my brother-in-law about 65 feet underwater. The next thing I knew we were on the surface with him dragging me towards the shore. We're still not sure what triggered it, probably a panic attack, but I had honestly felt fine the whole dive up to this point and have done 20 plus times with no other incidents. But I had blacked out and overinflated my BCD and rocketed to the surface in about 6 seconds. I had a reverse sinus squeeze, popped eardrums, and type 2 DCS. Spent 5 hours in the deco chamber. Thank God I have a US Marine rescue diver for a brother-in-law. Not exactly a horror story, but that one time as we were circling a reef I saw a huge eye that belonged to something buried in a sand. We just looked at each other as I passed by. I can tell it was definitely curious but non-aggressive. Had a weird feeling afterwards. I got bent. The DCI lead to 2 strokes on top of the normal DCI stuff. This was back in 2014. And I am still dealing with the complications. All because I did my math wrong and have a PFO I didn't know about. Because of my time in the chamber I have really bad PTSD. So I have a service animal. And I don't sleep. I just am claustrophobic all of the time. Had a 7-hour dive cleaning a Coast Guard cutter. Tender had thrown a majority of my umbilical in the water because who wants to tend you swimming up and down a hull for that long? I finished my dive, I swam over to the ladder, and when I was 3 rungs from breaking the surface I felt my umbilical get tight. I couldn't get out of the water. Had to pull myself down to where my umbilical had gotten wrapped up in some rigging underneath the pier where the ship was moored. Cutting that shit free in the dark after a 7-hour dive pretty much ruined all the happy fun time. I had nightmares about that for a while.